Hi guys, I'm going to be recording audiobooks, well, at least audio versions of my fanfiction, Moonprints of the Sun Kingdom. While this is not a actual professional recording, considering I'm just literally sitting in my closet, hopefully it will be at least bearable with my cat trying to get into my closet. Alright, let's begin with Prologue. Prelude. Prelude. Varian, wait! Hugo called to the Prince of Corona, the boy he had been instructed to protect by the king and queen years ago, and his mother. Come on, Varian laughed. Can't keep up, tall and lanky? Hugo scowled without venom and hurried after him. Varian had seen a cave from the castle walls and deemed it the property of the duo. A new hangout area, he had elaborated. Upon closer inspection, it was a deep pit with slanted sides that echoed with the sound of running water. It may be flooding from the downpour, even though it hadn't started directly above them yet. But if the almost black storm clouds were anything to go off of, no one needed a meteorologist to tell them a big storm was coming. Hugo looked up nervously at the stormy clouds. Are we sure we should be doing this? Your parents won't be happy, the boy muttered in a stage whisper. They have no idea I'm here. Besides, my lessons for today were canceled because of the storm, so my tutors and whatnot couldn't even get here. I have the day to myself, Varian shrugged excitedly. Besides, how often do we get to hang out outside of the stuffy walls of the castle? He put his hands behind his head. Varian, the boy frowned. Listen, I felt like you would be more excited about this. What if there's treasure down here? Varian grinned, inching backwards to the edge of the pit with his seductive shake of his hips and head. Knowing Hugo couldn't resist the lure of treasure. Hugo hummed, clearly wanting to give in to the temptation, but shook the idea out of his head. Goggles, if your parents knew we were doing this, they would kill me, Hugo strained. I'm already on thin ice with my mom. If you were to see Hugo on a day out, you would think he was a pirate or a thief. How he acted around the treasure room made Varian think he must have been one, or both, in another life. But no, he was the son of the most respected guard in Corona. The high expectations for him overshadowed his urge to take everything and get away to a life of adventure. And if you couldn't picture that adventure without Varian, that was his business. Well, Varian's voice turned into a yelp as he was cut off, slipping into the slender cave. Varian! Hugo shrieked, sliding down the side of the pit gracefully. I'm okay. Varian huffed as the blonde tripped over a wet rock halfway down, losing his grace as he toppled on top of Varian. Oops, Hugo chuckled nervously. Varian huffed and then froze as he looked up at the shining stalagmites. Whoa, Varian's eyes widened. His eyes quickly narrowed as his cheeks raised in a smile. The thunder above still made Hugo nervous, and he had a duty to protect Varian from his ventures and generally most harm as his main guard, and his friend. I don't get paid enough for this, Hugo frowned as he followed Varian. You don't get paid at all, Varian reminded him as his voice echoed down the cavern. The prince vanished from Hugo's sight as he paled and ran, careful not to trip or slip on the wet rocks. Again, that is. Even at the ripe age of 14, Varian acted like a 6-year-old, exploring the world every time he left the streets and castle of Corona, which was fair, based on his limited explorations due to his parents' paranoia. Seriously, imagine the things I could collect, Varian chuckled, grabbing his small satchel and snapping a thin stalagmite from the floor. Are you sure we should be taking things? We don't know what could happen if you break a rock, Hugo said, hoping the snapped rock didn't cause a cave-in. Oh, relax. It wasn't connected to anything. It's impossible for it to be what helps it stay together. Varian waved him off. When did you get all cautious? Varian stood and stared into Hugo's eyes. I'm just worried about the storm, he confessed, rubbing the back of his neck with his hand, feeling flushed heat creeping up his neck when he saw those eyes. Varian sighed. Yeah, but it would be a cool story if we got stuck down here, he exclaimed far too cheerfully. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence, Hugo deadpanned. Whatever, the dark-haired boy rolled his eyes. As they continued down the tunnel, thunder rumbled above them. The storm had begun. Chapter 1. Secret Moon. 14 years ago, King Fredrick sat with his queen, the royals spending the night together in silence, the storm outside the only sound they could hear. It was near impossible to forget that she could still be out there, suffering somehow, even after 4 years of being without her. Suddenly, Fredrick lost interest in his book. "I'm going to my study," he said curtly, without waiting for Arianna to respond. She didn't. The soft tapping of shoes from a familiar man startled the king from his miserable mood. "Your Majesty," Nigel bowed. Fredrick sighed and turned. "What do you want, Nigel?" Nigel looked nervous. "You received a message, Your Highness." The man pulled a scroll from his pocket, inserting it into the king's hand. Fredrick raised an eyebrow and read the scroll. "Your Majesty, the King of Corona, my old friend. I wish I could say this message comes with good news, but alas, my past with the Brotherhood has caught up to me. Ooooo has gone on a journey, and I have been left alone with our son. The journey she has gone on is one I don't believe she will return from, as much as it pains me to admit. As I'm sure I've described before, you were aware of her sickness before he was born. But do you know how I cured it? I'm sure you can guess. However, this miracle caused the Brotherhood to deem me a traitor. They don't know exactly what I've done, but I can assure you they will have a reason to want my head on a spike. I can't live with them hunting me alongside taking care of Varian. I wouldn't be able to live with myself if they took him from me. I know he will never make up for the daughter you lost, but I hope you may fill that hole in your heart you've described to me over our many meetings and letters. Arianna will love him, that much is for sure. He has an adventurous spirit, like your wife and his mother. Take care of him, please. I only hope that someday I can return. Your old friend, Kieran." Fredrick took in the letter as the footsteps of Nigel returned. The king stared at the basket in Nigel's hands. "I assume pastries from Mr. Monty. He seems like the kind of guy to bring cookies in the middle of this storm." Nigel smiled tensely. The king knew there were no pastries in that basket. The king carefully pulled the blanket from the top of the weaved basket, revealing a black-haired boy with a blue streak in his hair. He was sleeping peacefully with his thumb in his mouth. "Oh, my ears, I'm so sorry. Why would someone leave a child here? We need to bring him to the nearest orphanage." Nigel gasped as he saw the boy. Fredrick scowled. "No." Nigel blinked. "But, sir—" Fredrick walked back towards the room where he and his queen had been mourning, the child carefully cradled in his arms while the message from Kieran was tight around his grip. Knocking lightly on the door, a soft "come in" responded. Fredrick pushed it open, the bundle close to his chest. "Fredrick, what is—" Queen Arianna blinked, staring at the baby-shaped bundle in the king's arms. "It's from Kieran. Ooooo's gone, and he's running from his past." Fredrick sighed, offering her the scroll Kieran had left. She looked up as her eyes reached the bottom of the page, quickly urging to see the young boy. "Oh," she muttered as she saw him. A small yawn escaped the boy, making his bright blue eyes open slowly. Queen Arianna stared in awe at the infant. He blinked at her, and she expected him to start kicking and screaming. But instead, he let out a soft coo and reached out his hands to grab Arianna's necklace. The symbol of Corona, carved out of a fire opal. She smiled and urged her husband to unclip it. He did, and wrapped it around Varian's neck at her encouragement. The boy giggled as it shone in the candlelight. "So," Fredrick moved close, "he may not fill the hole in our hearts, but maybe he can squeeze in and make room." She smiled softly, referencing Kieran's letter while wiggling her finger in the boy's face, who seemed to be trained on catching it in his small hands. Fredrick smiled as well. "Sir, is it wise to take in an orphan?" Nigel asked from the doorway. Fredrick glared at him and stood, moving to the door. "Nigel, this child was given to us to protect. We will not let him or his father down. Now, please, go clean the dining hall and the kitchen, Without the handmaidens here because of the storm, someone needs to get all these things done," he said curtly before closing the door, quickly and angrily at first before remembering the child in Arianna's arms, and proceeded to softly click it shut. Arianna was quick to doze off with a boy in her arms, immediately adopting to her role as a mother. Fredrick smiled and joined her on the bed. Varian slowly drifting off to sleep again as the thunder eased into a relaxing downpour. It had been a few months since the last Festival of Lights, but Arianna and Fredrick were brought someone that could make the pain of the lost princess easier to bear. When they looked at their daughter's empty cradle, not gone, no one could fix it, but Arianna prayed her second child would help heal it. Arianna started to cry. Varian. The following morning, Fredrick and Arianna woke to the peaceful silence that was quickly shattered by soft crying. Arianna was thankful that the child wasn't full-on wailing, although she worried why he wasn't. Shh. She gently bounced him, resulting in the boy to look at her with wide and wet eyes. The Coronian crest necklace dripping with drool, showing he had probably been up for a while. Arianna smiled softly and started singing softly, Fredrick slowly joining in. Home is behind the world ahead, and there are many paths to tread. Fredrick started harmonizing with his wife. The infant was now enthralled by the song. Through shadows to the edge of the night. Arianna beamed at the boy who seemed to be trying to join them with his incomprehensible babbling. Until the stars are all alight, mist and shadows, cloud and shade, all shall fade, all shall fade. Arianna finished, the boy staring at her, the tears gone and replaced by wonder. Fredrick laughed softly. I think he liked it. She hummed her agreement, a fond smile on her face as Varian started chewing on the blanket, learning his lesson after putting a sharp point of the necklace in his mouth. She suddenly found herself frowning, resulting in the king's worried eyes. What's wrong? He asked softly. What will we tell our people? She wondered aloud. He frowned as well, giving his large finger to Varian for Varian to mess with. I don't know. You can't tell them we were given an orphan child. How would other orphans in the kingdom react? They might try to... The queen's eyes began to water. Hey, I won't let anyone take him or hurt him, I swear. He'll sleep in the cradle, right here in here, or with us. We could tell our kingdom that we hid your pregnancy, he suggested. Arianna sniffed. What about our handmaidens and Nigel? The handmaidens aren't here. And they're all loyal, the king said. Besides, even if they were to gossip, it would be nothing more than rumors. You know the power rumors have, Fred, she stated. He sighed. Yes. Good thing it's been a while since I left the castle, huh? She joked morbidly. The king forced a smile. I guess so. He is so cute, your majesty, one of Arianna's handmaidens cooed, resulting in a giggle from the boy. Why wouldn't you say anything? I'm sure your pregnancy was hard to bear, another said, watching from afar. Arianna held Varian in her lap, bouncing him on her knee as he faced her handmaidens. Well, she said quietly, I didn't want to have a lost prince, too. The handmaidens went silent, looking at her with sadness and sympathy. Do you mind not talking about it too much outside the castle? She asked, which resulted in hurried promises and vows from the woman. Arianna smiled as Varian leaned backwards to look at her, his big blue eyes looking like those of a lost kitten. Arianna chuckled as he reached for a loose hairstrand. She waved in front of him as he watched, completely stunned to silence by the silky hair swinging before him, the women watching. He is so cute, someone repeated. Arianna stood, cradling Varian in her arms. I've never even heard of a baby so calm. What's your secret? Her handmaiden Stella asked. I don't have one. He's been so quiet since the day we had him. She watched her phrasing. Seriously? Another blinked. My son wouldn't stop crying the first night. Barely got a wink, I did. The chorus of women stating their disbelief and jealousy for the quiet baby that was healthy resulted in a small whine from him. His eyes wet, but not a single wail escaped him. The women hushed immediately. Arianna felt her maternal instincts kick in as she made her way to the changing station, ready to play her part as his mother. The queen was tired a week later. The previous night, Varian broke his vow of silence, wailing in her arms in the early light of morning. Fredrick had told her to rest, which was near impossible as she paled in reminder to the night her daughter was taken. The wailing and the crying was hard to listen to with her eyes closed. The image of that witch leaping out the window was imprinted in her head as she listened to Varian's cries. Standing, she had to remember it was Varian crying and not her daughter. Walking over to Fredrick and watching as the baby was cleaned and changed, she smiled as she remembered that it was just Varian's cries of discomfort. It was almost second nature to take care of the boy, almost like her fantasies of her firstborn had been preparing her for this very moment. She didn't mind. Fredrick had allowed Arianna rest. She had been tired and overstressed. Even in the first month, she had barely given Varian to anyone, including him. The king had managed to convince her after swearing the baby wouldn't leave his sight. Setting himself down in his study, he found himself bouncing Varian to sleep as he signed paperwork and read scrolls. Your Majesty, Nigel stepped into the room, then noticed Varian on his leg. Nigel frowned in disapproval, but didn't voice his thoughts. I believe we should discuss this recent development. He put his arms formally behind his back. The king closed the book he had been studying. We are not giving him to an orphanage. I understand, however, the kingdom may be adamant about the adoption, he nodded. We aren't telling him he's adopted, the king said harshly. Me and Arianna discussed this already. It would cause too much diversity between the children on the streets and problems with our neighboring kingdoms. Nigel blinked in shock, almost surprised the king had thought of it. King Fredrick narrowed his eyes, ready to argue with the man further. It had been over a month, and Nigel still seemed adverse to the baby boy. Well, we will have to get the boy a crown fitted, if he is to be the Prince of Corona, Nigel commented instead of arguing. However, the words Prince of Corona left his mouth with a hint of venom and distaste. King Fredrick could tell that Nigel wanted to add something more, but decided against the threat of losing his job. Of course, me and Arianna have been planning designs. Something simple, yet elegant, he said with a soft smile. Nigel hummed and nodded. Have you the sketch? The king nodded and pulled out a sheet of paper with the sketch him and his wife had agreed on earlier that week. Nigel looked over it and hummed in approval. The design consisted of a single swirled gem with the color of the sun and a cyan that resembled the color of Varian's streak. The gem was attached to a golden rim that spiraled around it like a banister would, curling around the invisible head of Varian in the sketch. Small details like the intricate design of the golden frame had hints of the sun, moon, and the stars. The gold was linked in the back, melded together in a way that resembled roots. Nigel nodded. I will take it to the blacksmith. The king smirked. Tell Xavier I said hello. It will be done. Nigel bowed before taking his leave. Varian seemed to have awoken from his nap, looking up at King Fredrick, who was the only made aware of his consciousness, as he let out a soft coo at the older man. Fredrick's smirk turned into a genuine smile at the noise. Wagging his finger in the infant's face, he resumed his work, ignoring the sudden guilt that ate away at his chest.